Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I stand in support of the motion by the Honourable Member for Newton North Delta that, in the opinion of the House, the Temporary Foreign Worker Program has been open to abuse, resulting in the firing of qualified Canadian workers, lower wages, and exploitation of temporary foreign workers. Therefore, the government should A, impose an immediate moratorium on the stream of lower-skilled occupations, which include fast food service and restaurant jobs, and B, Mr. Speaker, request an urgent audit of the whole program by the Auditor General of Canada. Mr. Speaker, I want to first deal with abuse within the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. There have been complaints across the country, Mr. Speaker, but my perspective is the Newfoundland and Labrador perspective, with particular emphasis, Mr. Speaker, on my riding of St. John's South Mount Pearl. Mr. Speaker, the first time I heard of abuse with the Temporary Foreign Worker Program was in December 2012 when the Atlantic New Democratic Caucus traveled to Labrador West for meetings. We heard horror stories at the time, and I described them at the time as horror stories, Mr. Speaker, of more than 20 temporary foreign workers living in a single home. We went public then with the story, Mr. Speaker. I listened to the CBC radio clip again just this morning. It's available on the web, Mr. Speaker. It wasn't until November 2013, 11 months later, that Canada Border Services executed a warrant at a Labrador City residence as part of an investigation into housing arrangements for temporary foreign workers. And then, Mr. Speaker, it wasn't until April of 2014, earlier this month, 16 months after our caucus went public with the alleged abuse, that the Conservative government suspended 2 Labrador City residents from the Temporary Foreign Worker Program. 16 months later, Mr. Speaker, 4 former employees of the 2 restaurants told CBC News that 26 foreign workers, Mr. Speaker, had shared one Labrador City split-level residence for months in violation of the employer's agreement with the federal government, in violation of every law, Mr. Speaker. That was the first case. My office, Mr. Speaker, has dealt with numerous cases. Another complaint was received by my office in early 2012 from the parent of a young person who worked at a McDonald's in St. John's. It was alleged that the young person's hours of work were cut back when the restaurant brought in temporary foreign workers. The parent explained that temporary foreign workers were guaranteed a set number of hours as a condition of their being brought in, and at the expense, Mr. Speaker, of our local young people. Yet another complaint was recorded by my office, this time in late 2012, and it involved, Mr. Speaker, 5 Guatemalan laborers employed as chicken catchers. They had 2 complaints, Mr. Speaker. First, they alleged they weren't paid what they were promised they would be paid before coming to work in Newfoundland and Labrador. So the pay was the first complaint. They alleged that they were paid less than their Canadian counterparts for the same work. The other complaint had to do with living conditions, Mr. Speaker. My staff visited the basement apartment where they were lodged, and we took pictures, Mr. Speaker. We also brought in the local newspaper, which wrote an article on the plight of the Guatemalan workers. Let me quote from that article, Mr. Speaker. Quote, "The 5 workers say they were living in subpar conditions in the basement of a company-owned Mount Pearl house, sharing a tiny, ill-equipped kitchen, living with mold and holes in the ceiling that dripped water, and sleeping on filthy mattresses. Each was charged $80 a week for the basement apartment for a total of $1,600 a month. When they complained, one worker said he was told it must be better than his home in Guatemala." In Guatemala, Mr. Speaker. One of the points I made with the media at that time in December 2012 was how there's no oversight in Canada when it comes to temporary foreign workers. No federal oversight. The Provincial Labor Department looked into complaints by the Guatemalan workers that they weren't paid what they were promised they would be paid. All the provincial government could do, and they tried their best, Mr. Speaker, was ensure that foreign workers were at least paid the minimum wage. As for the living conditions, Mr. Speaker, where they were forced to live, the squalor, Mr. Speaker, we went to the local municipality and the General Consulate of Guatemala in Montreal. Repairs were eventually made to the basement apartment, but the 5 Guatemalans, Mr. Speaker, what became of them? They went home and they haven't returned, which is what they were afraid of, Mr. Speaker, that as a result of complaining, there would be repercussions. And there were repercussions, Mr. Speaker. My point is this. The federal government runs the temporary foreign worker program, and it should investigate when there are complaints about pay and when there are complaints about living conditions. When there are complaints, period, Mr. Speaker. But my office couldn't find anyone federally to investigate. I received 2 more complaints in recent days, Mr. Speaker. One complaint is from an unemployed aircraft technician who says temporary foreign workers are replacing locals who are ready, willing, and able to work. Now, we referred that complaint, Mr. Speaker, to Human Resources Skills Development Canada, and the answering machine said they would not provide any feedback or give any update as a result of the information we submitted. Where, Mr. Speaker, where is the accountability? There is none. The other complaint was from a former employee of McDonald's in St. John's, Mr. Speaker, but I'll save that quote until the end. The temporary foreign worker program has grown, Mr. Speaker, to outrageous proportions. It's pushed down wages and resulted in Canadians being let go or forced to move on and replaced with foreign workers. The number of temporary foreign workers in Newfoundland and Labrador jumped from 916 in 2006, Mr. Speaker, to 1,392 in 2010. That's a growth of almost 500 workers in the span of 4 years. Now, at the same time, according to Statistics Canada, our youth unemployment rate in Newfoundland and Labrador as of this month, Mr. Speaker, stands at 20.2%, the highest in the country. Less than 50% of youth aged 15 to 24 were employed in Newfoundland and Labrador in 2013. So what are we doing with temporary foreign workers? There's a need, Mr. Speaker. There is a need. All sides of this honorable House admit that there is a need. But the temporary foreign worker program is not administered in the best interests of foreign workers to ensure that those foreign workers are paid fairly, Mr. Speaker, and they have decent living conditions. The temporary foreign worker program is also, Mr. Speaker, not administered in the best interests of Canadians, in the best interests of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians. It is not addressing unemployment, Mr. Speaker. If anything, it's driving down wages and taking away work from our own. Now, Mr. Speaker, the Conservative Employment Minister brought down a moratorium late last week on the use of temporary foreign workers in restaurants. Now, Mr. Speaker, that does not go far enough. The moratorium should be on all lower-skilled occupations until the Conservative government, until this government, fixes the program and there's an independent review by the Auditor General of Canada of the entire kit and caboodle. Mr. Speaker, let me now return to that second complaint that I received in recent days. I want to end with a quote from that complaint, Mr. Speaker. I want to end with a quote from that letter. Quote, "To be blunt, if business owners viewed staff as more than indebted serfs and did the right thing and actually paid better wages and took care of their staff, there would be less turnover, happier, more productive staff, and, to the benefit of Newfoundland's tax base, less out-migration." Thank you, Mr. Speaker.